Have you ever noticed how some people smile when you succeed, but something in their eyes feels different? They clap for you, congratulate you, tell you they're happy for you. But the moment you leave the room, your name becomes a problem they need to solve. Jealousy doesn't always arrive screaming. It doesn't wear a warning sign. It slips into conversations, hides inside compliments, disguises itself as concern, and quietly rewrites the way people see you. The strange thing is that most people think jealousy is just an emotion. It's not. It's a force that can turn friends into competitors, admiration into resentment, and ordinary people into masters of manipulation. And the most dangerous part? The people controlled by jealousy often don't even realize it's happening. Most people think jealousy and hatred are the same thing. They imagine that if someone is jealous of you, they must dislike you. They must want you to fail. They must be against you from the beginning. But human psychology is rarely that simple. The truth is far more uncomfortable. Jealousy is often born long before hatred ever appears. In fact, many people become jealous of the very people they admire the most. Think about it. Nobody feels jealous of someone they consider completely irrelevant. Nobody loses sleep over a person they never notice. Jealousy begins with attention. It begins when someone sees something in another person that they wish they had themselves. It could be confidence, success, intelligence, respect, influence, beauty, freedom. It doesn't matter what it is. The moment they see a quality they desire but struggle to obtain, a silent comparison begins. At first, that comparison may seem harmless. They tell themselves they are simply observing, simply learning, simply admiring. But the human mind has a strange habit. It doesn't just compare what people have. It compares what people have against what it lacks. And when that gap becomes too large, admiration slowly transforms into discomfort. The uncomfortable part is that jealousy is rarely about the other person. It is about the reflection they create. Every achievement becomes a reminder. Every victory becomes evidence. Every success exposes an insecurity that was easier to ignore before. Suddenly, the jealous person is not looking at you anymore. They are looking at themselves through you. That is why jealousy often feels irrational. A person can be successful in many areas of life and still become deeply disturbed by someone else's progress. It is not because they are weak. It is because insecurity does not operate according to logic. It operates according to perception. If someone believes they deserve what you have, every step you take forward feels like proof that they are standing still. The mind hates that feeling. It searches for ways to protect itself. Sometimes it creates excuses. They were lucky. They had connections. They were born with advantages. They cheated. They manipulated the system. Anything that reduces the emotional discomfort of accepting that someone else achieved something valuable. Because accepting the truth can be painful. Accepting the truth means admitting that another person developed qualities, habits, skills, or discipline that produced results. It means accepting that the gap is real. And for some people, that realization attacks their identity. So instead of asking how they can grow, they begin asking why you have what they don't. That question changes everything. The focus shifts away from self-improvement and toward resentment. Small criticisms begin to appear. Compliments become mixed with subtle negativity. Support becomes conditional. Smiles become less genuine. The admiration that once existed starts fighting against the insecurity underneath it. And that is where many people make a mistake. They assume the jealous person hates them. Not necessarily. In many cases, the jealous person is fighting a private battle they cannot openly admit. Part of them may still respect you. Part of them may still want what is best for you. But another part feels threatened by what your existence represents. They are trapped between appreciation and insecurity. That internal conflict creates strange behavior. One day they encourage you. The next day they criticize you. One moment they celebrate your success. The next moment they downplay it. Their reactions seem inconsistent because they are being pulled in two different directions at the same time. The reality is that jealousy is often the fear of being outshined. the fear of becoming invisible, the fear that someone else's light will expose their own darkness, the fear that if you keep rising, they will be forced to confront everything they have avoided confronting within themselves. And fear has always been one of the most powerful forces controlling human behavior. People will hide it, deny it, disguise it as logic, disguise it as advice, disguise it as concern. But beneath the surface, the fear remains exactly what it has always been. The fear that someone else's growth is revealing the limits they secretly placed on themselves. The moment you walk into a room, comparisons begin. Not because people are evil, not because they consciously decide to judge every person they meet. It happens automatically. The human mind is obsessed with measuring value. It measures status, influence, attractiveness, confidence, intelligence, success, and countless other things within seconds. Most people never notice it happening because the process is buried deep beneath conscious awareness. People like to believe they see others objectively. They don't. They see others through the lens of their own insecurities, ambitions, fears, and unmet desires. That is why two people can look at the same individual and have completely different reactions. One person sees inspiration, another sees a threat. One sees possibility, another sees competition. The difference is not in the person being observed. The difference is in the mind doing the observing. Comparison begins the moment someone notices a quality they wish they possessed. Maybe it's confidence, the ability to speak without hesitation, the ability to command attention without demanding it, the ability to remain calm while others panic. Sometimes it's success, the recognition, the respect, the opportunities. Sometimes it's something as simple as happiness. A person who appears genuinely content can unintentionally provoke discomfort in someone who feels trapped by their own dissatisfaction. The strange thing about comparison is that it rarely seeks fairness. The mind doesn't compare entire lives. It compares selected highlights. Someone sees your achievement, but not your sacrifices. Someone sees your confidence, but not your years of self-doubt. Someone sees your success, but not your failures. Someone sees your results, but not the countless moments nobody witnessed. The comparison is incomplete from the very beginning, but emotions do not wait for complete information. They react instantly. And once emotions take control, reality becomes less important than perception. That is where the danger begins. People start creating stories. Stories about why you have what you have. Stories about why they don't. Stories that protect their ego from uncomfortable truths. Because genuine self-reflection is difficult. Looking inward requires responsibility. It requires admitting mistakes, weaknesses, missed opportunities, and personal limitations. Many people would rather create explanations about others than confront realities about themselves. The mind always seeks comfort, and comparison often provides an escape. If someone can convince themselves that your success is the result of luck, privilege, manipulation, or unfair advantages, they no longer have to ask difficult questions about their own choices. The burden disappears, at least temporarily. But comparison has another darker side. It transforms neutral situations into personal battles. A person's achievement suddenly feels like your loss. Their promotion feels like your failure. Their popularity feels like your rejection. Their growth feels like your stagnation, even though none of those things are logically connected. The human mind has a remarkable ability to create competitions that never actually existed. Someone can become your rival without your knowledge. They can spend months comparing themselves to you while you remain completely unaware. Every accomplishment becomes evidence. Every compliment you receive becomes another score on an imaginary scoreboard. Every step forward becomes another reminder of where they believe they should be. And because this battle exists primarily inside their own mind, it becomes impossible to win. No matter how much they achieve, someone else will always seem ahead in some area. There is always another target, another comparison, another reason to feel inadequate. That is why comparison can become addictive. The mind keeps searching for validation through measurement, hoping that one day it will finally feel secure. But security never arrives, because the problem was never external. The problem was internal. People compare themselves because they are searching for answers and wedgers about their worth, their identity, their significance, their place in the world. They look at others and try to calculate their own value. But human value was never meant to be measured that way. The moment self-worth becomes dependent on comparison, every successful person becomes a potential threat. Every talented person becomes a source of anxiety. Every confident person becomes a reminder of what feels missing. And that is why some people secretly compare themselves to you, even when they smile at you, support you, and speak kindly to you. Because beneath the surface, a silent calculation is taking place. A calculation driven by insecurity. A calculation fueled by desire. A calculation that asks the same dangerous question over and over again. If they can become that, then what does that say about me? Most people imagine jealousy as something obvious. A person becomes angry, hostile, bitter, and openly resentful. They expect warning signs. They expect dramatic confrontations. They expect jealousy to announce its presence. But real jealousy is usually much quieter than that. It moves in shadows. It changes behavior in ways so subtle that even the jealous person may not recognize what is happening. That is what makes it dangerous. People rarely wake up one morning and decide to become jealous. The transformation happens gradually. It begins with a comparison, then a feeling of discomfort, then a growing awareness that someone else possesses something they desire. The emotion settles into the mind like a slow poison, spreading quietly through thoughts, perceptions, and reactions. The first thing jealousy changes is attention. A person who was once indifferent suddenly becomes unusually aware of what you are doing. They notice your achievements. They notice your opportunities. They notice who praises you, who supports you, who spends time with you. Information that once seemed irrelevant now captures their focus. The mind begins collecting evidence. Every success becomes another detail. Every compliment becomes another observation. Every victory becomes another entry in a growing mental record. Most people don't even realize they are doing it. They simply feel compelled to pay attention. Then jealousy starts changing interpretation. This is where reality becomes distorted. The same event that once seemed positive suddenly appears suspicious. A promotion becomes favoritism. Confidence becomes arrogance. Ambition becomes selfishness. Talent becomes luck. Nothing about the actual situation may have changed, only the lens through which it is being viewed. Jealousy has a remarkable ability to turn admiration into criticism without changing the facts. A quality that was once respected becomes something to attack. A strength becomes a flaw. An achievement becomes a target. The mind searches for explanations that reduce emotional discomfort. And criticism is often easier than acceptance. Then behavior begins to shift. The changes are rarely dramatic. In fact, they are often so small that they seem insignificant at first. Conversations become slightly colder. Support becomes less enthusiastic. Encouragement becomes less frequent. Responses become shorter. The energy changes before the words do. People often sense something is different long before they understand why, because emotions reveal themselves through patterns. A jealous person may still smile, still laugh, still act friendly, but their behavior begins carrying contradictions. They celebrate your success while minimizing its importance. They compliment you while immediately mentioning a flaw. They support you while quietly questioning your decisions. Every positive statement seems connected to a subtle negative one. Not enough to create conflict, just enough to create doubt. Jealousy also changes memory. People begin remembering events selectively. They focus on your advantages while forgetting your struggles. They remember your victories while ignoring your failures. They remember moments that support their emotional narrative and discard information that challenges it. This selective perception strengthens the jealousy even further. The story becomes more convincing. The emotions become more justified. The gap between reality and perception grows wider. Then something even stranger happens. Jealousy starts influencing decisions. A person may withdraw opportunities they once offered. They may become less willing to help, less willing to share information, less willing to celebrate your growth. Not because they consciously want to harm you, but because supporting your success now creates emotional discomfort. Every step forward you take reminds them of something unresolved within themselves. And the mind naturally avoids discomfort. That avoidance creates distance, sometimes physical distance, sometimes emotional distance, sometimes both. The relationship begins changing shape without any direct confrontation, without any clear explanation, without any obvious trigger. People often describe this as feeling like someone became a different person. In reality, the change was happening beneath the surface, long before it became visible. Jealousy had already begun rewriting the way they perceived the world. And perception controls behavior. Perhaps the most dangerous part is that jealousy often disguises itself as rational thinking. The jealous person rarely says, "I'm jealous." Instead, they say they are being realistic, objective, honest, concerned, practical. The emotion hides behind logic. It wears the mask of reason. And because of that disguise, it can operate for years without being challenged. A person can genuinely believe their reactions are justified, while jealousy quietly directs their thoughts from behind the curtain, changing what they notice, changing what they believe, changing how they respond, changing how they treat people they once admired, changing relationships that once felt genuine, changing behavior so gradually that nobody notices the transformation until the distance has already been created, and the emotion has already taken control of the story unfolding inside their mind. Most people think manipulation comes from power-hungry masterminds sitting in dark rooms, carefully plotting how to control others. Reality is far less dramatic and far more common. Some of the most effective manipulation does not come from hatred, revenge, or cruelty. It comes from jealousy. A feeling so ordinary, so human, that people rarely question the damage it can create when left unchecked. Jealousy is uncomfortable. It creates tension between what a person wants and what they believe they lack. The mind naturally wants relief from that tension. Some people use that discomfort as motivation to improve themselves. Others choose a different path. Instead of rising to reach what they admire, they attempt to pull others down to reduce the distance. That is where manipulation begins, not with a grand plan, not with an evil intention, but with an emotional need. A need to feel less inferior, a need to restore wounded pride, a need to protect a fragile sense of self-worth. One of the most common tactics driven by jealousy is subtle discouragement. It rarely sounds negative on the surface. In fact, it often sounds reasonable. Someone may tell you to be careful, to lower your expectations, to avoid taking risks, to stay realistic. They present themselves as concerned and supportive. Their words appear harmless, but hidden beneath the advice is something else. A desire to see you stop moving forward, because every step you take forces them to confront the steps they never took. The manipulation works because concern is difficult to challenge. If you question it, they can claim they were only trying to help. Another tactic is constant minimization. Every achievement becomes smaller than it really is. Every success receives an explanation that reduces its value. You worked hard. They focus on luck. You developed a skill. They focus on circumstances. You earned recognition. They focus on connections. The goal is not necessarily to convince others. The goal is to convince themselves. If your accomplishments can be reduced, then the emotional discomfort becomes easier to manage. Jealousy also fuels comparison traps. These people constantly introduce comparisons into conversations. There is always someone better, someone richer, someone smarter, someone more successful. No matter what you achieve, they immediately shift attention elsewhere. The finish line keeps moving. The purpose is psychological. If your success never feels significant, it becomes harder for you to fully enjoy it. And if you cannot enjoy it, the emotional gap between you and them feels smaller. Then there is the manipulation of reputation. This is where jealousy becomes especially deceptive. Rarely does the jealous person launch direct attacks. That would expose their motives. Instead, they rely on suggestion, questions instead of accusations, doubts instead of claims, small comments placed carefully into conversations. I don't know, something just feels off. Maybe I'm wrong, but I heard something interesting about them. The statements appear innocent, yet they plant seeds. And once doubt enters someone's mind, it often grows without further effort. Jealousy understands that suspicion can travel farther than evidence. Another tactic involves withholding support. People often assume manipulation requires action. Sometimes it requires inaction. A jealous person may refuse opportunities they once shared. They may remain silent when support matters. They may avoid recommending you, promoting you, or acknowledging your achievements. Not openly, not in ways that create obvious conflict, just enough to limit your progress while preserving their image. The absence of support becomes a silent form of control. Then there is emotional manipulation, a particularly effective weapon because it attacks guilt. The jealous person may act hurt by your success, distant themselves unexpectedly, become colder without explanation. Create tension that makes you feel responsible for their emotional state. Suddenly, you find yourself shrinking your achievements to maintain peace, hiding good news, avoiding certain conversations, downplaying victories. Not because you did anything wrong, but because someone else's jealousy has trained you to feel guilty for growing. Perhaps the most fascinating part is that many people engaging in these behaviors genuinely believe they are justified. Jealousy rarely announces itself. It disguises itself as fairness, as concern, as honesty, as criticism, as caution. The person becomes convinced they are simply reacting to reality. They fail to recognize that reality is already being filtered through insecurity, that every judgment has been touched by comparison, that every reaction has been shaped by fear. Fear of being left behind, fear of feeling insignificant, fear of watching someone else become what they secretly wished they could become. And when fear takes control of perception, manipulation no longer feels like manipulation. It feels like self-defense. It feels reasonable. It feels necessary. It feels deserved. While the real motive remains hidden beneath layers of justification, quietly pulling the strings from a place the person refuses to examine. Failure makes people uncomfortable, but success does something even stranger. It forces people to compare. When someone fails, most observers feel sympathy, relief, or indifference. Failure does not threaten their identity. It does not challenge their beliefs about themselves. It does not force them to ask difficult questions. Success, however, has a way of exposing things people would rather keep hidden. That is why success often attracts more jealousy than failure, not because success is bad, not because achievement is wrong, but because success acts like a mirror. And many people are afraid of what they might see in their own reflection. When someone watches another person fail, there is usually no emotional pressure. The situation confirms what they already expect. Life is difficult. Goals are hard to achieve. People struggle. The world continues exactly as they imagined it would. But when someone succeeds, especially in a way that seems impossible, the entire psychological landscape changes. Suddenly, excuses become weaker. Limitations become questionable. Comfort zones become visible. A person standing where you once stood and reaching a destination you wanted to reach creates a dangerous possibility. The possibility that more was available to you than you were willing to admit. And that realization can be deeply unsettling. The mind prefers certainty. It prefers familiar explanations. It prefers stories that protect self-esteem. Successes has a way of destroying those stories. Someone loses weight after years of struggle. Someone builds a business from nothing. Someone develops confidence after years of insecurity. Someone transforms their life despite obstacles. Each achievement sends a message that many people never ask to receive, a message that says change is possible. And while that message inspires some people, it terrifies others, because possibility creates responsibility. If change is possible, then avoiding change becomes harder to justify. If growth is possible, then stagnation becomes more difficult to explain. If success is achievable, then excuses lose some of their power. That is why success often creates emotional discomfort in people who are unhappy with their own progress. Your achievement becomes evidence they cannot easily ignore, evidence that challenges the narrative they built around their limitations. And the human mind does not enjoy having its narratives challenged, so it searches for ways to reduce the discomfort. Sometimes it dismisses the achievement, sometimes it criticizes the person, sometimes it invents explanations, luck, timing, connections, privilege, anything that restores psychological balance, anything that prevents a deeper examination of personal choices. The irony is that people are often most jealous of those who remind them of themselves. A stranger's success may attract attention, but a friend's success can create comparison. A colleague's success can create insecurity. A sibling's success can create resentment. Someone who started from a similar position and moved ahead becomes difficult to ignore. Their progress removes the comfort of distance. The comparison feels personal. That is why jealousy frequently appears among peers rather than strangers. People compare sideways more than they compare upward. They compare themselves to people they believe belong in the same category, the same age, the same background, the same opportunities, the same starting point. When one person suddenly moves ahead, the invisible balance changes. And not everyone handles that change well. Success also attracts jealousy because it brings visibility. People notice what shines. People notice what stands out. People notice what receives attention. The more visible your success becomes, the more opportunities there are for comparison. Some people celebrate that visibility, others quietly resent it. Not because they dislike you, but because they crave the recognition they see you receiving. The applause becomes painful when they imagine it should belong to them. The admiration becomes uncomfortable when they wish they were the ones receiving it. The spotlight becomes threatening when it highlights feelings of inadequacy they worked hard to suppress. Successes reveals differences. Differences in effort, differences in discipline, differences in mindset, differences in action. And while some people respond to those differences with curiosity and growth, others respond with envy, because growth requires confronting uncomfortable truths. Jealousy requires only comparison. One path demands responsibility, the other demands blame, and blame is often easier, especially when success continues rising higher, becoming brighter, becoming harder to ignore, forcing people to confront not only what you achieved, but everything they abandoned, postponed, feared, or convinced themselves was impossible long before you proved otherwise. One of the greatest illusions jealousy creates is the belief that the problem exists outside of us. It convinces people that their discomfort is caused by someone else's success, someone else's confidence, someone else's opportunities, or someone else's achievements. The mind points outward because looking inward is far more difficult. Blaming another person is easy. Facing yourself is not. That is why breaking free from the psychological control of jealousy begins with a painful realization. The person you envy is not controlling your emotions. Your interpretation of them is. Two people can look at the same successful individual and experience completely different reactions. One feels inspired. The other feels threatened. One sees possibility. The other sees unfairness. The difference is not in the person being observed. The difference is in the story being told inside the observer's mind. Jealousy survives through stories. Stories about what others have. Stories about what you lack. Stories about how life should have unfolded. Stories about what is fair and unfair. The more those stories repeat, the stronger the emotion becomes. Eventually, the emotion begins shaping reality, not reality itself, but the version of reality you experience. The jealous mind becomes trapped in constant observation, watching, measuring, comparing, calculating. Every achievement by another person becomes information that must be processed. Every success becomes another reminder. Every accomplishment becomes another emotional trigger. The person is no longer living their own life. They are living in reaction to someone else's. That is the true prison jealousy creates, not hatred, not anger, dependence. Emotional dependence on external comparisons, dependence on outcomes that belong to other people, dependence on standards created by someone else's journey. And a person trapped in comparison can never feel free, because there will always be someone with more money, more influence, more recognition, more talent, more opportunities. The race has no finish line. The scoreboard never disappears. The comparison simply finds a new target. Breaking free begins when a person stops asking, "Why do they have that?" and starts asking, "Why does their success affect me so deeply?" That question changes everything, because it redirects attention away from the other person and toward the source of the emotion. The source is often insecurity, sometimes regret, sometimes fear, sometimes unrealized potential, sometimes years of self-doubt hidden beneath confidence. Whatever the cause may be, it cannot be solved by focusing on another person's life. It can only be solved by understanding your own. That understanding requires honesty, a level of honesty most people avoid. It means admitting that certain reactions are not about others at all. It means recognizing that emotional pain often points toward an unresolved part of yourself. The quality that triggers jealousy may actually reveal something you value, something you desire, something you secretly wish to develop. Seen this way, jealousy becomes less of an enemy and more of a signal pointing toward unmet needs, hidden ambitions, and neglected goals. The emotion itself is not the problem. The response to it is. One person sees jealousy and chooses resentment. Another sees jealousy and chooses growth. One becomes obsessed with what others possess. The other becomes focused on building what is missing. The emotion remains the same. The direction changes. And direction determines outcomes. Freedom from jealousy also requires abandoning the fantasy that life must unfold according to a perfect timeline. Many people suffer because they compare their chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. They compare beginnings to endings, private struggles to public victories, unfinished journeys to completed results. The comparison is unfair from the start, yet the mind accepts it anyway. Breaking that habit requires discipline. The discipline to focus on progress rather than comparison. The discipline to measure growth against your past self rather than another person's present reality. The discipline to celebrate another person's success without interpreting it as your failure. Because someone else's victory was never evidence of your defeat. Someone else's growth was never proof of your limitation. Someone else's light was never responsible for your darkness. The moment a person understands that, the chains begin to weaken, the obsession begins to fade. The comparisons lose their power. The emotional dependence starts breaking apart. And the energy once wasted watching others slowly returns to the place where it always belonged, toward building a life that no longer needs comparison to justify its value.